Every single element in this film, from the rotting Rat King to the ancient bells leading them to the cave, is actually rooted in real occult traditions that go back thousands of years. Michael Shanks didn't just make a horror movie, he created a step-by-step guide to one of the most sacred transformations in mystical tradition. By the end of this video, you'll never look at this movie the same way again. And honestly, you might never look at relationships the same way either. Before we dive into these mind-blowing secrets, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. I have a lot of great new movie breakdowns releasing soon, and you don't want to miss what's coming next. Let's start with the most obvious symbol that everyone missed.
Babe? What are you doing?
Found it.
What?
Oh,
Secret number 1, the Rat King. When Tim opens the light fixture and the Rat King falls out, it's not just gross-out horror. A Rat King is a real phenomenon where multiple rats get their tails tangled together, creating one grotesque collective entity. They move as one unit, think as one mind, and survive as one organism. Individual identity completely dissolves into the group consciousness. But here's what most people don't know. Rat Kings have been considered omens in occult tradition for centuries. Medieval mystics saw them as manifestations of collective consciousness magic, where separate beings merge into something greater than the sum of their parts. The movie literally opens by showing you exactly what's going to happen to Tim and Millie. They're going to become a human Rat King, two separate people fused into one collective being. But unlike the rotting rat, their fusion will be beautiful, spiritual, and life-giving. This isn't random symbolism. This is the director telling you from minute one that you're about to witness an ancient spiritual transformation that most people have never heard of. But wait until you hear about the mythology that explains why this transformation is even possible. Secret number 2, the Zeus Quote. The Zeus Quote exposes real Platonic mystery school teachings. Remember when Jamie tells Millie about Zeus splitting humans in half? Most people think that's just a cute reference to Plato's Symposium. But what if I told you that Aristophanes' myth wasn't just a story? It was encoded esoteric knowledge from ancient mystery schools. Here's what they don't teach you in philosophy class. Plato wasn't just recording myths. He was preserving secret spiritual teachings that were too dangerous to share openly. The mystery schools of ancient Greece taught that humans originally existed in a state of divine unity, with both masculine and feminine aspects perfectly balanced. According to these hidden teachings, the splitting by Zeus wasn't punishment. It was a necessary stage in spiritual evolution. Souls had to experience separation and longing before they could consciously choose to reunite at a higher level of awareness. The mystery schools taught that finding your other half wasn't about romance. It was about achieving the alchemical marriage, the fusion of opposites that creates the divine hermaphrodite, the perfected human being. When Jamie recites this myth, he's not just explaining the movie's premise. He's revealing that Tim and Millie are about to undergo one of the most sacred transformations in Western esoteric tradition, the conscious reunification of the split soul. But for this transformation to happen, they need the right sacred space. And that cave they fall into? It's not just any cave. Secret number 3. The Sacred Cave. The cave is actually a sacred womb temple from fertility cults. That collapsed church cave where Tim and Millie fall and drink the mysterious water. Every detail about that location screams ancient fertility cult worship, and I can prove it. First, notice how the cave literally breathes with Tim when he's unconscious. In goddess worship traditions, caves represent the womb of the Earth Mother, living, breathing spaces where death and rebirth occur. The fact that the cave synchronizes with Tim's breathing means he's already connecting with the feminine divine principle. Second, look at those church pews embedded in the cave walls. This isn't just artistic imagery, it's showing you that Christian structures were built on top of much older pagan sacred sites. For thousands of years, fertility cults used underground chambers for rebirth rituals, where initiates would symbolically die and be reborn as transformed beings. The water they drink isn't just mysterious liquid, it's coming from a sacred spring. Ancient fertility cults believed that underground springs were direct connections to the goddess's life-giving power. Drinking from these springs during ritual ceremonies would prepare initiates for spiritual transformation. But here's the most incredible detail. The cave is accessed through collapse, through destruction of the Christian church above. This represents the necessary breakdown of conventional religious thinking before you can access the deeper, older spiritual truths hidden beneath. Tim and Millie literally fall through the surface level of reality into an ancient temple space where the real magic can begin, and that magic starts with what they consume.
no, it's fine.
Secret number 4, the sacred water. The water they drink is literally ancient love potion magic. When Tim and Millie drink that water in the cave, most viewers think it's just mysterious movie liquid that causes the fusion. But if you know anything about ancient mystical traditions, you'll recognize exactly what they're consuming, and it's way more powerful than you think. Sacred springs have been used in love magic for millennia, but this isn't about making someone fall in love with you. This is about consciousness-altering substances that prepare the soul for spiritual marriage. Ancient mystery schools used specially prepared waters from sacred sites to induce altered states of consciousness necessary for advanced spiritual work. The water they drink contains minerals and possibly psychoactive compounds that break down the barriers between individual consciousness. In alchemical tradition, this is called the dissolution phase, where separate elements must be broken down before they can be recombined into something new. Notice how they both drink willingly, without coercion. This is crucial in occult practice. True spiritual transformation can never be forced. Both participants must consciously choose to undergo the process. But here's what's really incredible: the water doesn't just affect their bodies, it affects their consciousness first. Watch the movie again, and notice how their thoughts and emotions start synchronizing before their bodies begin fusing. They're experiencing what mystics call consciousness merger, the preliminary stage of spiritual union. The physical fusion that happens to their legs overnight is just the external manifestation of an internal spiritual process that began the moment they drank from that sacred spring. But they're not navigating this transformation alone. Something is guiding them through the process. Secret number 5, the Tibetan death bells. Those bells are Tibetan death bells, guiding souls between worlds. Jamie's house showing up at the end, they're not just mysterious movie props. They're based on a real spiritual practice that's been used for over 1,000 years. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, bells are used to guide souls through the bardo, the intermediate state between death and rebirth. The specific tone and rhythm of these bells helps consciousness navigate between different levels of reality during spiritual transformation. But here's what most people miss. Tim and Millie are experiencing a form of death and rebirth. Their individual selves are dying so that a new, unified being can be born. The bells are literally guiding them through this process, just like Tibetan death bells guide souls through the afterlife. Notice how the bells always appear at crucial transition moments. They lead them to the cave where the transformation begins. They're present at Jamie's house when they learn the truth about what's happening, and they appear at the end when the transformation is complete. This isn't coincidence, it's spiritual technology. The bells are functioning exactly as they do in Tibetan practice, providing sonic guidance for souls undergoing radical transformation. But the most incredible thing is that someone else has already completed this journey successfully, and they're there to help guide Tim and Millie through the process. Secret number 6, Jamie's Hermetic identity. Jamie's true identity connects to Hermetic alchemy's divine hermaphrodite. When Jamie reveals that they're actually two people fused into one, most viewers see it as a plot twist, but if you understand Hermetic alchemy, you'll recognize that Jamie represents the ultimate goal of the great work, the divine hermaphrodite, also known as the rebus. In alchemical tradition, the rebus is the perfected human being that contains both masculine and feminine principles in perfect balance. It's not about gender, it's about achieving psychological and spiritual wholeness by integrating all aspects of human nature. Look at how Jamie is presented in the movie. They're wise, peaceful, and completely comfortable with their dual nature. They've achieved what alchemists spent lifetimes trying to accomplish, the conscious union of opposites within a single being. But here's the most important detail. Jamie isn't trying to convince Tim and Millie to undergo the transformation. They're simply sharing their knowledge and letting them choose. This is crucial in Hermetic tradition. Spiritual advancement must be freely chosen, never forced. Jamie represents proof that the transformation Tim and Millie are undergoing isn't horrific. It's the completion of human spiritual evolution. They're living evidence that two people can become one without losing what makes them beautiful and unique. But not everyone who attempts this transformation succeeds, and the movie shows us exactly what happens when people resist the process. Secret number 7, the failed fusion. The missing couple's deformation shows what happens when spiritual fusion fails. Remember Simon and Carrie, the missing couple that Tim finds grotesquely fused together in the cave? Most people see them as a warning about what could happen, but in occult tradition, their deformed state represents something much more specific: what happens when you resist spiritual transformation. In alchemical practice, there's a concept called nigredo, the black phase where everything breaks down and becomes chaotic. If you fight this process instead of surrendering to it, you get stuck in the dissolution phase and never reach the beautiful reconstruction that comes after. Simon and Carrie's bodies are twisted and wrong because they fought against the fusion instead of accepting it. They tried to maintain their separate identities while their consciousness was already merging, creating internal conflict that manifested as physical deformity. Notice how they're still alive, but trapped in a state of perpetual suffering. This represents the spiritual limbo that occurs when someone begins advanced spiritual work but refuses to let go of their ego attachments. Their grotesque appearance isn't random body horror, it's showing you the exact consequences of resisting spiritual evolution. They're a cautionary tale about what happens when fear overrides faith during the most crucial phase of transformation. But Tim and Millie have something Simon and Carrie didn't, and it's hidden in the soundtrack. Secret number 8, Spice Girls Numerology. The Spice Girls song contains hidden sacred numerology. When two become one, by the Spice Girls plays during Tim and Millie's final transformation, most people think it's just perfect soundtrack selection. But if you understand sacred numerology, you'll realize this song choice reveals deep esoteric knowledge. In mystical tradition, the number 2 represents duality, separation, and conflict, the state of consciousness that experiences itself as divided. The number 1 represents unity, wholeness, and divine consciousness, the state of awareness that knows itself as complete. Two Become One isn't just a pop song about romance, it's describing the fundamental spiritual process that mystics have been teaching for thousands of years. The movement from duality consciousness to unity consciousness is the core goal of every major spiritual tradition. But here's what's really incredible. The song plays at the exact moment when Tim and Millie stop fighting the transformation and surrender to it completely. The lyrics, "I need some love like I never needed love before," aren't about romantic love. They're about the soul's desperate need to return to its original state of wholeness. The mathematical precision of this moment is no accident. The director chose this song because it encodes the exact spiritual principle that the entire movie is demonstrating, the conscious return from separation to unity. But the transformation can only be completed when both people are willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. Secret number 9, the sacrifice principle. Tim's willingness to die triggers the alchemical sacrifice principle. The turning point in Tim and Millie's transformation comes when Tim is willing to die for her, and she's willing to die for him. Most people see this as romantic sacrifice, but in alchemical tradition, this represents the most crucial phase of the great work, the voluntary death of the ego. In mystical practice, true spiritual transformation requires what's called ego death, the complete surrender of individual identity in service of something greater. This isn't physical death, it's the death of the separate self that thinks it's isolated from everything else. Watch the scene carefully. Tim doesn't just say he's willing to die for Millie, he actively chooses to let go of his individual survival instinct, and Millie does the same. They both reach the point where preserving their separate selves becomes less important than their love for each other. This mutual ego death is what triggers the final phase of their transformation. In alchemical terms, they've moved from nigredo, breakdown, through albedo, purification, to rubedo, reconstruction, but only because they were both willing to sacrifice their individual identities. The beautiful irony is that by being willing to die as separate people, they become immortal as a unified being. This is the core paradox of all mystical teaching: you must lose your life to find it. And what they become represents the ultimate goal of human spiritual evolution. Secret number 10, the Divine Androgyne. The final androgynous form represents humanity's original divine state. When Tim and Millie complete their transformation into an androgynous being, most viewers see it as weird body horror. But if you understand thousands of years of mystical teaching, you'll recognize that they've achieved something that spiritual seekers have been working toward for millennia. The Divine Androgyne, a being that perfectly balances masculine and feminine principles, appears in virtually every major spiritual tradition. In Kabbalah, it's called the Adam Kadmon. In Hinduism, it's Ardhanarishvara. In alchemy, it's the Rebbes. In Gnosticism, it's the restored human being. These traditions all teach that humanity's original state was androgynous, not physically, but spiritually. We contained both active and receptive principles, both logical and intuitive capacities, both strength and compassion in perfect balance. The fall, described in various mythologies, isn't about disobedience. It's about the split into separate genders and the loss of our original wholeness. Spiritual evolution is about consciously returning to that integrated state while maintaining individual awareness. When Tim and Millie greet Millie's parents at the end, they're not monsters. They're showing what human beings look like when they've completed their spiritual evolution. They're still recognizably themselves, but they've transcended the limitations of separate identity. The bell on the doorstep isn't a threat, it's an invitation. They've become what the ancient love cult has been working to create for generations. Proof that human consciousness can evolve beyond separation into conscious unity. Now I know what you're thinking. This is just a weird horror movie, not some deep spiritual teaching. But here's the thing. The most powerful spiritual truths have always been hidden in stories, myths, and art. The mystery schools never taught directly. They encoded their knowledge in symbols and narratives that would only be understood by those ready to receive them. What makes Together so incredible is that it's not just referencing these ancient teachings, it's demonstrating them. Every element of the movie, from the opening Rat King to the final transformation, follows the exact stages of spiritual alchemy that mystics have been practicing for thousands of years. Think about it. How many horror movies actually show you a step-by-step guide to achieving divine consciousness? How many films give you real spiritual technology disguised as entertainment? The director didn't just make a movie about body horror. He created a modern mystery school initiation, complete with all the symbols, stages, and teachings that would guide someone through their own spiritual transformation. And here's what's really mind-blowing. Dave Franco and Alison Brie are actually married in real life. They performed this alchemical marriage ritual as a real couple, which means their on-screen chemistry isn't just acting. It's two people who have already achieved a form of conscious union, exploring what that might look like taken to its ultimate conclusion. But I want to know what you think. Did you catch any of these occult symbols when you first watched the movie? Are there other details I missed that might have deeper spiritual significance? Drop a comment below and let me know which of these secrets shocked you the most. And if you spotted any other hidden occult references in the film, I'd love to hear about them. Think about it, spiritual transformation often looks terrifying from the outside. The death of the ego, the dissolution of individual identity, the surrender to forces beyond your control. These are genuinely scary experiences, even when they lead to something beautiful. Horror movies let us explore these transformative experiences safely, in a controlled environment where we can face our deepest fears about change, death, and the unknown. They're modern versions of the initiation rituals that mystery schools used to guide people through spiritual awakening. And Together might be the most sophisticated example of this trend. It's not just using occult imagery for shock value. It's actually teaching you how spiritual transformation works, step by step, symbol by symbol. I have to admit, researching this movie changed how I think about relationships entirely. We're so conditioned to think that healthy relationships are about maintaining independence while sharing experiences. But what if that's just the beginning? What if the deepest form of love isn't about two separate people choosing to be together, but about two people becoming so unified that the boundary between self and other starts to dissolve? Not in a codependent way, but in a way that expands both people beyond what they could be individually. I'm not saying we should all be looking for literal physical fusion, but maybe we could be more open to the kind of emotional and spiritual intimacy that the movie is really talking about. The willingness to let our individual identities be transformed by love rather than just enhanced by it. But here's the ultimate secret that ties everything together. The movie isn't just showing you what happened to Tim and Millie, it's showing you what's possible for human consciousness itself. Every spiritual tradition teaches that we're living in a time of great transformation, where humanity as a whole is evolving toward higher levels of awareness. The individual awakening that Tim and Millie experience represents what could happen to our entire species if we learn to move beyond separation consciousness into unity consciousness. And the most incredible part? By watching this movie and understanding its deeper meanings, you've just participated in that preparation. You've been exposed to the same spiritual teachings that mystery school initiates spent years studying. If this video opened your mind to new possibilities about spirituality, consciousness, and the hidden meanings in horror films, then please subscribe to the channel. I'm constantly discovering movies and shows that are packed with authentic occult knowledge, and I break down exactly what they're teaching and why it matters. But before you go, let me leave you with one final thought. If a simple horror movie about a couple getting stuck together can contain this much authentic spiritual wisdom, what other films are hiding life-changing knowledge in plain sight? The mystery schools never disappeared. They just learned to hide their teachings in the stories we tell ourselves for entertainment. And once you know how to look, you'll start seeing these hidden lessons everywhere. Keep questioning. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.